Good day all, and welcome to this webinar provided by Doctor's Data. Today, we're going to take a quick walk through the GI360 stool test with focus on the laboratory methods that we utilize towards evaluation of your patient's gastrointestinal microbes. So why the focus on specific laboratory methods? Well, to be honest, to date, no single approach truly provides all of the clinically important information that today's astute clinicians are demanding. So, being realistic, Doctor's Data utilizes a combined complementary approach to fill in the gaps inherent to even the latest and greatest space-age technology. So let's begin with a summary of what the GI360 provides. The GI360 provides a very in-depth analysis of the gastrointestinal microbes, the yeast, the bacteria, the parasites, the viruses, using complementary methods: molecular, standardized PCR, state-of-the-art culture with proteomic identification, microscopy, ova and parasitology, and the novel and clinically validated Dysbiosis index. We also provide extensive stool chemistries and biomarkers and direct susceptibility testing for bacteria and yeast. So let's take a look at the pros and cons of the different methods that we utilize. Molecular, PCR. PCR evaluates the microbes based on their unique DNA fingerprints. PCR can be extremely sensitive and specific. In fact, it's the standard of care now in the hospital setting for the common pathogenic viruses, bacteria, and parasites, but we can go beyond that. So the cons: PCR is awesomely sensitive. Problem is, it asks the question, is it there? In other words, you're only going to find what you have a PCR probe for. The probe sets are often commonly very limited in scope, and very importantly, PCR cannot provide susceptibility guidance. That requires viable organisms, not just pieces of DNA. At Doctor's Data, we use highly standardized PCR platforms to ensure highly reproducible results. We use two different PCR platforms. One is FDA approved, that's for the GI pathogens, and the other is CE marked, a platform that was developed by researchers in Norway. So let's talk about the pros and cons of the complementary microbiology, the culture. We use multiple culture conditions for imbalanced, dysbiotic, pathogenic bacteria, as well as yeast. And we then identify the microbes via proteomic analysis, that is the laser-based MALDI-TOF MS. So unlike PCR that asked, what is it there? The culture asked, what is there? What is there? We're throwing a broader net. And there we can identify the non-targeted, that is the non-PCR-based bacteria and yeast. And today, the reference library that we use with our proteomic analysis contains over 1,400 different genera and species of bacteria and yeast. And that allows us to detect the less common emerging pathogens. We've seen several cases now of the heretofore not reported Laribacter hongkongensis in the US, and also Helicobacter canis. No probes for those. We wouldn't have found those without the culture and MALDI-TOF. Also, very, very importantly, culture enables direct susceptibility testing. That requires live organisms expressing their genetic and their phenotypic expressions. The cons: absolutely. Most strict anaerobic bacteria are not routinely cultured. Hence, you fall back to PCR for those. So for parasites, we use PCR and microscopy. PCR is absolutely more sensitive, but again, very limited in the number of probes that one has. Microscopy, ova, and parasitology, therefore, offers a greater breadth of analysis for parasites. Also, if you're not looking under microscopes, you're not going to see those red blood cells, white blood cells, Charcot-Leyden crystals, and the mucus. You're just not going to see those things if you're not looking for it. Now, let's go to page 1 of the report. Let's start our walk through the report. We start out with a very focused view of the microbiome abundance and diversity. And we use a very well-defined set of probes targeting the most clinically relevant bacteria. So we use 45 targets covering the 6 primary phyla. That's inclusive of 36 genera and 356 species. The results are compared in an unprecedented manner to a reference population of 1,100 observations. So we have a very, very large database for normal biosis. So what we do is we plot the results from the probing of the patient's microbiome on a hexagon indicating the 6 primary phyla. And then in the center here, you see this white spot that we call the web. In this case, it's the results for the patient, a very, very healthy patient. And we call that the sweet spot because it falls right in that green zone. So if you look at the key, the green zone is 0 deviations from normal biosis. We go out 1 standard deviation high, 2 standard deviations high, 3 high, and likewise towards the center. So we're basing everything on a very large normal biotic reference population. Now, from that PCR data, we can algorithmically derive a dysbiosis index that has been highly validated in several publications. Now, this dysbiosis index or score, called an index, ranges from 1 to 5, and a score or index of greater than 2 is considered dysbiotic. So the higher the dysbiosis index, the greater your patient's deviation from normal biosis. Again, based against a large number of observations. Now, on the first page, we continue on down and we highlight all the key findings in the report. First, all the key findings from the 45 probe targeting of the microbiome, so listed in importance, 2 and 3 standard deviations from norm. We also provide a summary on the first page of all the rest of the significant abnormal findings in the rest of the report. And that would be from microscopy, be from culture, be from the GI pathogens panel. Okay, so all of these components are not included in the calculation of the dysbiosis index. So we really have a test within a test. The dysbiosis test is a test within a test, quite a bonus. So if you want to dig further, in the next several pages, we have all the detailed data for that probe analysis of the microbiome, again, reported as deviations away from normal biosis. Again, based on that large healthy population. And, you know, some people like to really dig deep in here. To be honest with you, I get a most of the information I get, clinically relevant information I get, is from the web and the dysbiosis index and the key findings. A lot of people like to dig into these interesting species, but keep in mind, not all of these bacteria are very, very well defined with respect to what they might even do. So we give the option to dig deeper if you want, or just stick with the basics. For gastrointestinal pathogens, we use PCR, and this is an FDA-cleared PCR platform that detects the most common viruses, bacteria, and parasites that are associated with diarrheagenic disease. For parasites, again, to complement the limited number of PCR probes, we use the microscopy, looking at protozoa, tapeworms, flukes, and roundworms. For microbiology, we culture out and look at the pathogenic bacteria, the imbalanced bacteria, and of course, the yeast. And it's really important to appreciate that all of these fields here are expandable. So, for example, if we found my friend Larybacter, is a pathogenic bacteria, it would be included in this expandable panel. Likewise, if we had 10 different imbalanced bacteria, they would be listed here. And for the yeast, here we have 3 different species of yeast, but do appreciate that we can detect, identify 100, up to 180 different yeast species, including 86 species of Candida. So for this case, of course, we do susceptibility testing on bacteria and yeast. And in this case, we're looking at susceptibility of this patient's Candida albicans to natural botanical agents as well as pharmaceutical agents. Your choice how to go. And then finally, we're looking at very important stool chemistries, the digestion and absorption markers, very importantly, inflammation, the immune function of the secretory IgA, that first line of defense, and of course, the short chain fatty acids indicative of the metabolism by the overall microbiota. And then, of course, pH, beta-glucuronidase, and then occult blood. So my takeaways are really quite simple. The complementary methodologies that we use provide the most clinically relevant consensus of your patient's gastrointestinal microbiota. Standardized PCR platforms yield highly specific and reproducible results. The Dysbiosis Index provides a rapid identification of deviation from normal biosis. Stool chemistries round out our analysis of microbial metabolism and gastrointestinal health, and all of the key findings are summarized and thorough commentaries are provided for all abnormal results. So for more information, the GI360 reference guide and the numerous publications regarding the dysbiosis test, you might want to visit gi360.com. And I thank you kindly for your attention.